Blend Bunny and Ellis Atlantis have teamed up for another collab. Look at these two beautiful palettes. They are so gorgeous. So if you would like to see some swatches of these, a look using both of the palettes, as well as my overall thoughts, please keep watching. In case you're new here, my name is NOOPUR and I love indie makeup and all things color and sparkle, and this collection definitely is both of those things. It has both of those things, so I'm very excited to bring you this video. Thank you so much for clicking on it. I would really appreciate it if you could give the video a like, consider subscribing if you aren't already subscribed, and also please comment down below on which of these palettes is your favorite, whether the all matte one is or the all sparkle one. Now, per usual, before I give you some launch details, I just want to disclose that I did receive this collection in PR, and it will be launching on August 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The Volume 2 Eye and Face palette will be $42. The Garden of Stars All Shimmer palette will be $48. And the Volume 2 Origin and Imperial palettes, so the two halves of the big matte palette, those will each be $21. And I'm not sure whether anything is going to be code eligible, but since this is a collab, I do encourage you to use Ellis's code. It is just Ellis Atlantis. Here's the Volume 2 packaging up close. It is the usual sturdy Blend Bunny cardboard packaging with a holographic paper reflect. This is the inside of Volume 2. This palette has 30 mattes and is magnetic, but the pans are not labeled on the back. This palette is also offered as two halves, the Origin and Imperial mini palettes. The brand says Origin is the more warm-toned one and Imperial is the more cool-toned one. Here are swatches. Since 30 shades was too much to fit on one arm, I broke them up by mini palettes so you can see what each of those look like on their own. But I also have my photo swatches here so you can see the whole palette together. The matte formula is the usual good Blend Bunny formula, super creamy and pigmented, easy to build and blend. Here's the Garden of Stars packaging. It is the same type as Volume 2, but with this beautiful image of Ellis. Here's the inside. It has 18 shimmers that are multi-purpose. This palette is also magnetic and the pans are not labeled on the back. Unfortunately, I was not able to do my usual individual shimmer swatches. There were just too many of them, but most of these shimmers have similar formulas. They mostly have a smaller particle size with a couple leaning more medium. Nothing is super textured or flaky. I was also happy to see no squishy or overly emollient shades, and some were actually a bit on the dry side. I don't think that there are any true multichromes, but a lot of these are duochromes or have soft multicolored sparkles in them. These definitely feel like a step up from past Blend Bunny shimmers that I have tried. So for my lookies in this palette, I think I'm going to focus on this column of pinkish mauve tones because the pink mattes in the Dollhouse palette are some of my favorites to reach for on a day-to-day basis for like mauve, neutral, adjacent looks, but I've had that palette for over 2 years and eventually those eyeshadows are going to go off because makeup expires. So I'm curious to see how these will function as a potential replacement for those tones. I'm going to be starting with this matte in the middle of the column as my transition shade because these bottom two are just too light for me to use in that way. I'm just kind of roughly running this through my crease, but I am going to be focusing it on the inner half first and then tapering it off towards the edge over here. Dip back in one more time and you can see that I've already done this eye before doing this one. I like to do one eye off camera before I show you what I'm doing just so that I know how things apply and you can see what I'm working towards. Even though this eyeshadow is like, I wouldn't say it's like super light, like it's the third shade in the column, but on me, you know, it's not. It's like a transition shade. I feel like it built up pretty easily. And no issues building this up or blending it out. It feels like the usual good Blend Bunny matte formula. Also running this on the inner portion of my lower lash line, but avoiding this area right here. I really like the tone of this eyeshadow and also the depth, if that makes sense. And what I mean by depth is that I feel like this shade in the middle is not like, it's not too light to work as my transition shade, which I'm really glad because I'm comparing it to Dollhouse over here, where the lightest matte over here, it doesn't look like it compared to Volume 2 of Ellis, but this shade is too light for me to use in my crease as a transition shade. I have to mix it with the shade below it. Here are the shades swatched out just so you can see what I mean. This is the one from Ellis Volume 2, and this is the one from Dollhouse, and you can see this one has so much white in it, I cannot use this as a transition shade. And then here is the next shade down in depth. This is from Ellis Volume 2, this is from Dollhouse. They are very close, so I am very happy to have this shade now. The deepening up shades though are fairly different. Once again, this is from Ellis, this is from Dollhouse, and the Dollhouse one is a lot darker. And I feel like this one is almost a little bit more, like it's not a warm tone shade, but in comparison to this one, it has a little bit more warmth. So obviously for the next step in my look, I'm going to be dipping into this matte. I'm going to be focusing this shade over here on the outer half of my crease, kind of doing the opposite of what I did with the first shade, and then bringing it slowly inwards as there's less on my brush. And of course, blending it out this way as well. These shades are just so buttery soft and pigmented, but easy to blend. Nothing less than I would expect from Blend Bunny. I'm actually not even going to do a second dip like I usually do. I think I'm just gonna leave it like that. That is enough pigment for like the soft type of look that I'm going for. But I am going to run this on my lower lash line, of course. This time doing the opposite again, starting on the outer half and then working my way inwards. I dip back in one more time and I'm building it up again. Over here it is taking another layer just because I don't have eye primer down here, which is very normal performance across all brands. Now to deepen up, I'm just going to go all the way up the column and use this matte over here. So as I suspected, this matte does not give me as much depth as the deepest matte in Dollhouse, like in the pink column. That was one like medium layer. I didn't pick up a ton of pigment, but I'm going to now pick up more to kind of match this eye over here. Grabbed a little bit more and I'm just going to do the same thing, really pack it on over there first, because this area doesn't really get blended out much. Then I picked up just the tiniest amount more, and now I'm going to start blending this out a little bit. I will say that the trade-off of this not being super deep dark is that it basically blended itself. I feel like I barely had to work to blend it out or to blend it into the previous matte over there. I'm just going to feather it in this area just a tiny bit. And then I'm also going to run it over here on my lower lash line, of course, to join everything up. Now I'm going to dip into some shimmers, and I really want to start with this one over here because it has that warm, cool contrast that I love. It's got this smoky purple base and a beautiful gold reflect, and I just think it'll look so good with these mattes. So I'm going to be applying this on like the outer 2/3 of my lid, starting with my finger for maximum impact. I definitely think this is the best way to apply these shimmers if you want like a high shine finish. But you absolutely still can pick them up with a brush. As you can see right here, they apply just fine with a brush, but I just feel like if you want like a super shiny, sparkly finish, you will have to layer it up with a few times with a brush or use a glitter glue or something. And I just prefer starting with my finger to get that like maximum pigment. But then the brush works really well for feathering it inwards like this. For the inner third of my lid, I'm going to pick up this shimmer Gleam. And I don't know if you can tell, but this shimmer did arrive to me broken. It was the only shade that was broken. And I was able to smush it back into the pan just fine, but I just want to test the application. So this shade does pick up easier with a brush, and I don't know if that's just like the formula of the shade. It does feel drier than the other shimmer that I use, and I wonder if that's why it was more prone to shattering. And it's not like it has any texture or anything. It's still a very smooth shadow, and the particles are on the smaller side, but in comparison to this shimmer over here, it's a bit more piecey and like just looks more dimensional, and this one over here is just like super smooth and the particles are like super fine, which does make this shimmer that I'm applying now more sparkly than the other shimmer. I really like this combo so far, and now I just have to choose an inner corner shade. I'm gonna pick up this shimmer over here for the inner corner. This shimmer has a very sheer like salmon pink base, and when applied lightly like this in the inner corner, it doesn't really even show up on my skin tone. It also has a slight multicolored sparkle effect. I don't know how visible it's going to be on camera and even in Sparkle Cam when I do that, but it's so pretty in real life. It's got a bunch of icy white silver sparkles and also blue sparkles resting on that sheer coral salmon base, playing between warm and cool tones at the same time, which I really love. Just like throughout this whole look, I love the combination of warm and cool tones. Here's the final look, and I don't think anyone is going to be surprised to hear that I really like it because this is a very me kind of look with the mauve pink mattes and this shimmer over here with the dusty purple base, the inner swoop shimmer that's got the multicolored sparkles with the blue and the icy white silver. It's all of my favorite things, so of course I love how this turned out. Now it's time for Sparkle Cam, and I feel like with these shimmers, they aren't super shifty or anything. I think at most they can be classified as duochrome, so it's really just about like the sparkle of them and how pretty they are. And I think you can actually see the white and blue sparkles that I was talking about in my inner swoop shade, so I am very happy about that. Now I'm going to give you my thoughts on the collection, and I want to start with the packaging of both of these palettes. I think it's so beautiful. I love this hollow paper on both of them. I love to see this from Blend Bunny. I feel like they haven't done like a fully hollow paper for their palettes before, if I'm not mistaken, and I really love this artwork. It is so pretty and perfect for an all shimmer palette. Moving on to the volume 2 all matte palette. Of course, I do love that this packaging is also magnetic. So is the all shimmer Garden of Stars palette. That's also magnetic. And as someone who likes to BYOP and move shades around and things like that, I always really appreciate this. I just wish that the shades were labeled in the back, especially with like an all neutral palette like this, where some of the tones are like easy to mix up. I think it would be really helpful to have the shade names on the back. As far as this color story goes, I think it makes so much sense for Ellis to do a neutral follow-up palette to volume 1, because volume 1 was like a super colorful rainbow palette, which by the way, I don't have that palette, which is why I don't have it to like show you right now or do any comparisons with. And I didn't do any comparisons in this video. Honestly, I just don't have time today, and all I really showed you was how these pink mattes compare to Dollhouse. But if you want proper comparisons, I suggest checking out Deandra Nicole over on Instagram. I will link her reel down in the description box. She does a bunch of comparisons if you're curious. Hi, editing Noopur over here. So I didn't end up doing proper swatch comparisons, but I still wanted to show you Ellis Volume 2 side by side with these other neutral leaning palettes from Blend Bunny, just so you can see them in the same lighting together. Please keep in mind that Dollhouse has been discontinued. I do really like that this palette is also divided into the Origin and Imperial palettes. One is supposed to be more cool toned, one is supposed to be more warm toned. So if you're interested in only some of the shades, I like that you're able to pick up a slightly smaller palette, especially because so many of us already have a ton of neutrals in our collections. That being said, I don't fully agree that Origin is the warm toned one. I do think Imperial is a cool toned palette, but Origin to me, it includes this orange row, this like brownish neutral row, and this row over here. And I feel like of the 3 rows, only this one is warm toned. I feel like this one is like a true neutral, and this one actually skews a little cool in my opinion. So I feel like overall this palette is quite cool toned, and I don't really feel like the 2 mini palettes are like an even warm cool split. I'm also a fan of the Blend Bunny gradient layouts. I think it makes it so easy to do your makeup really quickly in the morning, especially with a neutral palette where I feel like, you know, typically when it comes to neutrals, I just do like a monochromatic gradient, and this makes it so easy to just kind of like go down the row. But I will say for my personal preferences, I could have done without like the lightest shade in each of the columns, because they're just kind of like useless to me. I don't really do matte inner corner highlights, and they're not useful for me as blending out shades. So for my preferences, I could have done with like one less row of mattes, but I totally understand that if you have a lighter complexion or if you just prefer bright mattes, then I can see how those are useful. I do want to point out that all of the deepening up shades in this palette, except for the black matte over here, are not as dark as the deepening up shades in Dollhouse, in Longing, and even in All Done Up, which are their other neutral leaning palettes. I feel like the depth shades in those palettes are like super dark, and these ones just have like a bit of softness to them, which could be a pro or con depending on how you look at it, because in a neutral palette like this, where if you're using it to do softer, more basic day-to-day looks, maybe you don't want to go that deep, dark, and smoky. But for someone like me, who I really like to add a lot of depth to my outer corners, I do wish that the deepening up shades in this palette were just like a touch darker and matched the depth level of their other palettes. But I've also heard from so many people that they don't enjoy the super deep dark shades in Blend Bunny palettes, so if that's you, then maybe this palette will be right up your alley. Quality wise though, no complaints here. This is the usual good Blend Bunny matte formula, very pigmented, very easy to build and blend out, and just such a fabulous formula, definitely in like my top 3 matte formulas of all time. Moving on to Garden of Stars, which is is an all shimmer palette, and I feel like that's not super common for Blend Bunny, but I think it makes the perfect counterpart to the Volume 2 palette, and even Volume 1, because Volume 1 only had that one column of shimmers in the center and it was mostly matte, so I'm happy to see this as kind of like a companion shimmer palette to those two. And the reason that I feel like it's a great companion palette to both Volume 1 and Volume 2 is because it has a range of neutral and colorful shimmers in multiple depths. So you have some like very light shimmers, but you also have some like deeper, richer, saturated shimmers. And so I feel like it's a really, really great companion for both palettes. Now I know everyone is curious what I think about these shimmers quality-wise, because I've said in the past that Blend Bunny doesn't make my favorite shimmers. They're not bad, but I'm not going to reach for them over my other indie special shimmers. And what I will say is the shimmers in this palette are by far the best shimmers that Blend Bunny has ever done. They are a huge improvement on shimmers in the past because none of these are squishy or overly emollient. A couple of them are actually a bit on the drier side, like this shade up here, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think this one over here as well is pretty dry. And none of them have that like super slick or super creamy formula that I have seen in other Blend Bunny palettes. Sparkle wise, some of these shimmers really did impress me. Like this green shimmer up here, I cannot wait to use this in a look. It is so sparkly and like properly green, which I feel like is a little rare. So many green shimmers tend to lean a little gold in my opinion, and I just love to see like a true green shimmer. But yeah, some of the shimmers in here are very sparkly, and some of them are like they're sparkly, but the particle size is so fine that when you get them on your lids, they're going to be more of like a refined sparkle instead of that like obviously chunky indie level of sparkle and shine, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of you in my comments are always telling me sometimes things are like too textured or too sparkly for you to wear day to day. And so I feel like this is actually going to be a very good shimmer palette for people who prefer smaller particles, smoother shimmers, or just shimmers that have like a little bit, I don't even want to say subdued sparkle because these are sparkly, but they're just not that like super glittery finish. And I also think this will be a good palette for those of you who are not super interested in like super shifty multichromes or very obvious multicolored sparkles. If you just want like pretty sparkly shades that maybe have a little bit of shift, a little bit of specialness to them, this is definitely going to be a good palette for you. I think all in all, this palette has the perfect everyday wearable type of sparkles. And of course, wearable doesn't mean one thing specifically, it's very subjective, but hopefully you know what I mean. And because these are a bit more on the wearable side, I think that they pair really well with the neutral mattes, which I've said before, but I really do feel like this is a great companion palette to the other one. That's it for this video. Let me know what you thought of this collection and whether you'll be picking it up. And also, congratulations to Maggie and Ellis on another wonderful collab. I think you knocked it out of the park. Thank you for watching till the end. Please don't forget to give this video a like before you go, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!